This story is titled, My Fiancé Introduced Me to Her Best Friend and Bragged About the Expensive Gift He Gave Her, so I realized she was cheating and immediately canceled our wedding. Hey Reddit, my name is Marcus and I'm 42 years old. I've been married to my wife Jessica, who's 36, for 17 years now. We don't have children, but we do own a house together and have always maintained shared finances. Up until recently, I thought we had what most people would consider a solid marriage, despite the normal ups and downs that any couple experiences over nearly 2 decades together. For some context about our lives, I work as a custom cabinet maker and antique restoration specialist. I built my business from absolutely nothing into what's now a successful workshop with 8 employees working under me. It's demanding work that requires long hours. 55 to 65-hour weeks aren't uncommon for me, especially when we have major commissions coming in that require my personal attention and expertise. Despite these demanding work schedules, I've always made it a priority to carve out time for Jessica and our relationship, because I believed that was what marriage required. Jessica works as a part-time Pilates instructor at a fairly upscale studio in our area. Over the years, she's also tried her hand at various entrepreneurial ventures, and I've always provided both financial and emotional support for every single one of them. I believed in supporting her dreams and ambitions, even when some of them didn't quite pan out the way she had hoped they would. So here's what happened last Tuesday, and I'm still trying to process the entire situation. It was our 17th wedding anniversary, which should have been a celebration of everything we'd built together over the years. Jessica had told me she had planned a special surprise dinner for the occasion, and she was being very mysterious about the entire thing. I was genuinely looking forward to it, especially after a particularly grueling month I'd just finished completing a major commission. A historic library restoration project that had nearly killed me with the level of detail and precision it required. She had made reservations at Romano's, which is this upscale Italian restaurant downtown. You know the type of place I'm talking about, where the kind of pasta you can easily make at home for $3 somehow costs $42 on their menu. It's the sort of establishment where you can easily drop $400 without even blinking. But I figured it was our anniversary and we deserved to celebrate properly. We were seated at a nice table by the window, and we ordered appetizers. I noticed that Jessica seemed unusually excited throughout the evening, almost like she had nervous energy radiating from her. She kept checking her phone repeatedly, which was actually quite unusual behavior for her, especially during what was supposed to be our special dinner together. Then she dropped the bombshell. She told me that the surprise wasn't just the restaurant itself. Marcus, she said, gesturing toward the entrance of the restaurant, there's someone I'd like you to meet. That's when this guy walked in. I'll call him Derek for the purposes of this story. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, dressed in designer clothes from head to toe, and he had that unmistakable smug expression that seemed to say, I'm better than everyone here. He approached our table with this confident stride, like he owned the entire place. Jessica stood up from her seat and took his hand, almost like they had rehearsed this entire moment beforehand. Then she said the words that I'll never forget. Marcus, this is Derek, my new partner. I swear you could have heard a pin drop in that moment. Everything around us went completely quiet, and I could sense that other diners were probably picking up on the tension that had suddenly filled the air around our table. I looked at Derek, then back at Jessica, who was watching me with this expectant, almost challenging expression on her face. New partner, she had said. Not friend, not acquaintance, but partner. I just paused for a moment, took a deliberate sip of my wine, and said simply, charming. Derek actually smirked, like he was genuinely enjoying this entire show that was unfolding. Jessica looked completely thrown off, as if she had been expecting fireworks from me. Maybe yelling, maybe some kind of dramatic scene. Perhaps she had even wanted that reaction for some twisted reason that I couldn't understand. Instead, I calmly signaled the waiter and asked for the bill. Specifically, I asked for the bill for my drink and the appetizer we had ordered before Derek the Magnificent had arrived at our table. I paid in cash, placed my napkin deliberately on the table, and stood up slowly. Well, I said, looking at both of them, you two enjoy the rest of your debut, I guess. And with that, I walked out of the restaurant without looking back once. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing whatever expression might have been on my face in that moment. The next morning, I was sitting in the office of Thompson & Associates, my lawyer's firm. By lunchtime, the divorce papers had been filed. I cited irreconcilable differences and adultery as the grounds for divorce. It was simple, clean, and required no unnecessary drama on my part. My phone started blowing up about an hour after the papers were served. Jessica left voicemail after voicemail, sent text after text, the whole 9 yards of desperate communication attempts. Then her sister Nicole, who's 44, started calling me as well, apparently enlisted as backup in whatever campaign Jessica was mounting to try to reach me. I haven't listened to any of those messages. I blocked Jessica's number immediately after the first few attempts to contact me, and then I blocked Nicole's number as well. Honestly, what's there to say at this point? Jessica showed me everything I needed to know at that restaurant table. Her actions spoke louder than any words or explanations she might try to offer now. It's been quiet for a few days on the phone front since I blocked their numbers. I guess they finally realized that I wasn't going to pick up anymore, no matter how many times they tried to call. I'm currently staying at my buddy Kevin's place while I figure out my next living arrangements, and the silence has been both deafening and strangely peaceful at the same time. I feel unusually calm about this whole situation, like some kind of internal switch just flipped when Jessica introduced Derek as her partner. The shock is definitely there, lurking under the surface somewhere, but mostly I'm just focused on taking the next logical step forward. Dissolution of the marriage, a clean break, and then moving on with whatever comes next in my life. I haven't told many people yet about what actually happened that night. Honestly, I'm still processing the entire thing myself, trying to make sense of how 17 years of marriage could end so abruptly and dramatically. The question that keeps running through my mind is whether I overreacted by immediately filing for divorce the morning after our anniversary dinner. Should I have stayed at the restaurant and tried to talk the whole situation through? Should I have given Jessica a chance to explain herself, as her sister Nicole apparently thinks I should have done? I keep turning these questions over in my mind, but every time I do, I come to the same conclusion. In my opinion, bringing your affair partner to your anniversary dinner and introducing him as your new partner is pretty much the textbook definition of "our marriage is over." There's really no ambiguity there, no room for misinterpretation or alternative explanations. She made her choice, and she made it in the most public and humiliating way possible. So I guess my question for anyone reading this is, am I the asshole for walking out the way I did? Did I handle this situation appropriately, or should I have responded differently to what was clearly a calculated and deliberate revelation? First, thank you all for the overwhelming support on my previous post. I genuinely didn't expect such a massive response to my situation, and reading through your comments has been incredibly validating in a way I can't really describe properly. It's strangely comforting to know that you're not the only person who's been blindsided by what feels like a grenade exploding in the middle of your life. So here's an update on what's been happening since I last posted. Unfortunately, the quiet period I mentioned didn't last very long at all. After a few days of complete silence from Jessica's end, she apparently figured out that I wasn't going to engage with her directly, no matter how many blocked numbers she tried calling from. So she decided to escalate the entire situation in a new direction. Since she couldn't reach my phone anymore, she started emailing me instead. These weren't brief, apologetic messages either. They were long, rambling dissertations about how I had supposedly overreacted to the whole anniversary dinner situation. According to Jessica's version of events, I was being immature for simply walking out of the restaurant instead of staying to talk it through like adults are supposedly meant to do. But here's what I keep coming back to. Talk what through exactly? The fact that she has a boyfriend she felt comfortable enough to bring to our anniversary dinner? The fact that she introduced him as her new partner, like we were business associates instead of a married couple celebrating 17 years together? In one particularly delusional email, Jessica wrote that Derek was a significant person in her life, and that she had wanted to be honest and upfront by introducing us. The sheer level of self-deception required to frame that anniversary dinner ambush as honesty is absolutely breathtaking. She actually had the audacity to write, "I thought you'd be adult enough to handle it, Marcus. We could have discussed a modern arrangement." A modern arrangement. I actually laughed out loud when I read that phrase. No thanks, Jessica. I'm not interested in being one of multiple partners in my own marriage. Call me old-fashioned, but I'm pretty sure most traditional wedding vows include something about forsaking all others, not adding to your collection like you're collecting Pokemon cards. Then, her sister Nicole decided to chime in with her own particular brand of wisdom. Nicole really went all out on this one. She managed to find my work email address, clever girl, and sent me her own long, sanctimonious message about how Jessica is apparently sensitive and going through a lot right now. According to Nicole's expert psychological analysis, I clearly never understood Jessica's needs, which is apparently why Jessica was forced to seek comfort elsewhere. Nicole also heavily implied that I was cold and distant throughout our marriage, and that my emotional unavailability is what drove Jessica into Derek's arms in the first place. This is classic blame the victim mentality, and I recognized it immediately for what it was. Apparently, according to Nicole's twisted logic, I should be apologizing to Jessica for making her feel awkward by filing for divorce after she publicly humiliated me at an expensive restaurant. The entitlement displayed by both sisters is absolutely astounding. They genuinely seem to believe that Jessica did nothing wrong, or at least nothing seriously wrong that couldn't be fixed with a heartfelt conversation and some couples counseling. It's like they're living in a completely different reality where basic social norms and common decency simply don't apply to them. I've also learned some very interesting information about Derek from a client of mine who happens to know him personally. Apparently, Derek fancies himself as some kind of lifestyle coach and spiritual entrepreneur, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. He runs these expensive weekend abundance mindset retreats, where he charges desperate, vulnerable people $4,000 each to reveal the secret that the key to wealth is aligning your energy with prosperity and positive vibrations. It's basically just an elaborate pyramid scheme dressed up with healing crystals and new age buzzwords. My client also informed me that Derek drives a leased BMW that he can barely afford the payments on, and he rents a loft apartment that's constantly teetering on the edge of eviction notices. This guy has con artist written all over him in neon letters, and Jessica apparently fell for his entire act hook, line, and sinker. On the legal front, Thompson and Associates received official confirmation that Jessica has been properly served with the divorce papers. They also sent a cease and desist letter to Nicole regarding her inappropriate emails to my work address. These feel like small victories in what's turning into a much messier situation than I had initially hoped it would be. Jessica also tried showing up at Kevin's house a few days ago, apparently hoping to ambush me there, the same way she had ambushed me at the restaurant. Kevin answered the door and told her very firmly that I wasn't seeing anyone and that all communication needed to go through my lawyer from this point forward. According to Kevin, Jessica threw a bit of a tantrum on his doorstep, going on about how I was being cowardly and hiding from reality instead of facing the situation like a man. Kevin just looked at her with his trademark deadpan expression and said, "He's not hiding. He's moving on. You should try it sometime." Then he closed the door right in her face. I've got to love Kevin. He's proven himself to be a solid friend through all of this chaos. I had a brief moment of weakness last night that I think is worth sharing with you all. I found myself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I had somehow missed obvious signs that this was coming. 17 years is an incredibly long time to be with someone. You think you know them inside and out, understand their thoughts and motivations, can predict their reactions to different situations. Then something like this happens completely out of nowhere, and it makes you question everything you thought you knew about your life. But the feeling of doubt passed pretty quickly once I really thought about it. What I'm experiencing isn't really sadness for Jessica specifically, or grief for the loss of our relationship as it existed. It's more like mourning for all the time we spent together, for all those shared memories that now feel somehow tainted and fake in retrospect. I find myself wondering how many of our happy moments were genuine on her part, and how many were just performances while she was thinking about someone else. But mostly what I feel at this point is just cold, hard resolve. Jessica made her choice when she started this affair, and she made it again when she decided to introduce Derek to me in the most humiliating way possible. Now she has to deal with the consequences of those choices, and I'm just making sure that those consequences are fair and appropriate, given what she's put me through. One more thing worth mentioning. I haven't heard a single word directly from Derek throughout this entire ordeal, which is interesting in its own way. I get the distinct feeling that he's the type of person who's perfectly content to let Jessica fight all the battles and handle all the unpleasant confrontations, at least until the situation starts to inconvenience him personally. We'll see how that dynamic plays out as the divorce proceedings move forward. For everyone who's been asking about our house and finances, let me give you the breakdown of our situation. We own a house together that's about 70% paid off at this point, which represents a substantial amount of equity that will need to be divided. While Jessica and I kept separate bank accounts for our day-to-day expenses, which is looking like a blessing in hindsight, we do have some joint investments and retirement accounts that will need to be sorted through. The fact that we don't have children together simplifies the entire process dramatically, both legally and emotionally. There are no custody arrangements to negotiate, no child support calculations to figure out, no questions about which parent gets the kids for which holidays. It's just a matter of dividing up the assets we accumulated together over 17 years and then going our separate ways. I've spent the last few days gathering up all of our financial records so that my lawyer can get a complete picture of what we're dealing with. This process has been quite revealing in terms of Jessica's spending patterns over the last several months. Patterns that I apparently hadn't been paying close enough attention to while they were happening. There have been some very interesting discoveries in these financial records that I hadn't noticed before, probably because I was so focused on my work and trusted Jessica to handle her own spending responsibly. I'm starting to see a clear timeline emerge that correlates with what must have been the beginning of her relationship with Derek. More details on that will probably come out in my next update, depending on what my lawyer advises me I can and cannot share publicly while the divorce is still in progress. Thanks again for all the support and encouragement from everyone who's been following this situation. It means more than you know to have objective outsiders confirm that I'm not losing my mind or overreacting to what happened. Sometimes, especially in the middle of the night when everything is quiet, I find myself wondering if I'm being too harsh or unforgiving about this whole thing. Then I remember the image of Jessica standing up at that restaurant table, taking Derek's hand and introducing him as her new partner on our anniversary, and I find my resolve again immediately. Some things are simply unforgivable, and public humiliation combined with months of deception definitely falls into that category. Things are escalating exactly as I figured they would, and I have to say it's almost fascinating to watch from a psychological perspective. The initial shock that Jessica and her cheerleading squad, mainly her sister Nicole, experienced has now morphed into full-blown entitled rage. It's like watching a nature documentary about a particularly unpleasant species. I can almost imagine David Attenborough narrating this whole situation. Here we observe the entitled ex-spouse in her natural habitat, attempting to rewrite reality while simultaneously trying to extract maximum resources from her former partner. So Thompson and Associates formally sent over our initial divorce settlement proposal yesterday. It was pretty standard stuff for our jurisdiction, especially considering that we don't have children and our major finances like bank accounts were always kept separate, which is really looking like a blessing when I look back on it now. The asset division should have been completely straightforward given our circumstances. Our main shared asset is the house we own together, so I propose that we sell it and split the equity 50-50 between us. Alternatively, if Jessica wanted to keep the house for sentimental reasons or whatever, she could buy me out at fair market value. It was a simple, fair, and completely reasonable proposal that any rational person would recognize as equitable. Apparently, Jessica and Derek thought this reasonable offer was some kind of outrageous injustice. Her lawyer, who's apparently a real shark according to what Thompson tells me, and probably expensive as hell too, sent back a counter-proposal that can only be described as pure fantasy. I'm genuinely wondering who's footing that legal bill, because it's certainly not coming from Jessica's part-time Pilates instructor income. Get this. Jessica wants the entire house for herself. Her reasoning? She claims she deserves it due to the emotional distress caused by my abrupt abandonment of our marriage. Those were her actual words, by the way. Apparently, I abandoned our marriage after she tried to be transparent about Derek. The level of delusion required to frame bringing your boyfriend to your anniversary dinner as transparency is absolutely mind-boggling. But wait, it gets better. Jessica also wants spousal support to the tune of $6,000 per month. Her justification for this demand is that she supposedly sacrificed her career potential for the sake of our marriage, and now she needs financial support to rebuild her professional life. This is completely news to me, considering that Jessica willingly chose to work part-time teaching exactly 4 Pilates classes per week, and I always provided enthusiastic support for every single one of her various entrepreneurial ventures that never quite managed to take off for one reason or another. Do you remember her organic kombucha delivery service? That brilliant business venture lasted all of 3 months before Jessica decided that the energy around it wasn't right for her spiritual growth. Or how about her intuitive wellness coaching for women business, which consisted of exactly 1 Instagram post before she decided it was too corporate for her authentic self? I funded all of those ventures without a single complaint, never said a word about the money being spent because I genuinely wanted Jessica to be happy and fulfilled. But now, apparently, I've been systematically oppressing her career dreams all these years according to her newly constructed narrative. Oh, and here's where it gets really interesting. She has a new partner who is supposedly representing her future, and Derek has finally made his first real appearance in this whole legal mess. Well, sort of. He was apparently with Jessica when she got served with the initial divorce papers at their new shared apartment. Yes, you read that correctly. They've already moved in together, which seems incredibly fast even by modern relationship standards. According to the process server, Derek was extremely smug during the whole interaction, had his arm around Jessica, and told the server to get lost in a very dismissive manner. Later, Jessica mentioned in one of her emails, she managed to find yet another email address for me, because she's nothing if not persistent, that Derek thinks my settlement offer is insulting, and shows how little I apparently valued her over all the years of our marriage. So now, Derek is apparently an expert on our 17-year marriage and feels qualified to weigh in on what constitutes a fair divorce settlement. That's certainly a charming development in this whole twisted situation. Meanwhile, Nicole has been conducting what can only be described as a social media rampage lately. She's been posting vague but obvious messages about selfish men and supporting my sister through a tough time with a narcissist. She's not naming names specifically, but it's pretty obvious to anyone who knows our situation what she's referring to. Some of our mutual acquaintances have reached out to me, confused about what's actually happening and looking for clarification. I've kept my response simple and straightforward with everyone who asks. Jessica ended our marriage in a very surprising way. I filed for divorce the next day, and now all communication is going through our respective lawyers. I'm not interested in playing her games or getting dragged into a public mudslinging contest. The dirty tricks have begun in earnest now, which I suppose was inevitable given Jessica's increasingly desperate situation. She's now claiming that I was financially controlling throughout our entire marriage, which is apparently her justification for demanding both the house and the substantial monthly spousal support payments. This narrative is so far removed from reality that it would be laughable if it weren't so calculated and malicious. She's also attempting to claim that my valuable vintage watch, a 1972 Omega Speedmaster that I inherited directly from my grandfather, was somehow a gift to the marriage, and should therefore be considered marital property according to her twisted logic. This is particularly galling because the watch is explicitly mentioned in my grandfather's will as being left specifically to me alone, and I have all the documentation to prove it. Thompson just sighed wearily when I told them about this latest attempt at asset grabbing and assured me not to worry. We have documentation for everything, they said. These are standard tactics that desperate spouses try when they realize they're not going to get everything they want. I've also made some very disturbing discoveries while going through our financial records in preparation for the divorce proceedings. Jessica's spending patterns changed dramatically starting about 10 months ago, and now I understand exactly why. Suddenly, there were charges appearing on our credit card statements for restaurants that I had never been to in my entire life, boutique shops that I'd never heard of before, and, most tellingly, men's clothing stores that I obviously had no reason to visit. There were also charges for weekend wellness retreats that Jessica never mentioned attending to me, which must have been very spiritual experiences shared with her significant person. The most infuriating part of this discovery is that she used our joint credit card for most of these expenses, which means that technically, I've been unknowingly funding their romantic affair for nearly a year. The sheer audacity required to do something like this is what gets to me the most. She brings another man to our anniversary dinner, effectively detonating our marriage like a nuclear bomb, and somehow I'm painted as the bad guy in her version of events. I'm supposedly the one causing her emotional distress, according to her narrative. The mental gymnastics involved in this level of self-deception are absolutely staggering. But I'm sticking to my principles throughout this entire ordeal. There will be no direct contact whatsoever between Jessica and me. Every demand, every accusation, every manipulative attempt at communication goes straight to Thompson and Associates. They're definitely earning their fee dealing with this level of drama and entitlement. I'm maintaining my calm exterior, but there's a cold fury building inside me. It's not the explosive kind of anger that makes you do stupid, impulsive things that you regret later. Instead, it's the patient, methodical kind of fury that focuses your mind and helps you make calculated decisions that get real results. Jessica wants a fight? Fine. She can have her fight. But it's going to be a fight based on documented facts and legal realities, not on her dramatic reinterpretations of our shared history and her victim complex. One small but interesting detail that Kevin found out through a friend of a friend. Derek isn't exactly the successful wellness guru and spiritual entrepreneur that he pretends to be. Apparently, his most recent abundance retreat resulted in 5 participants demanding refunds when they realized that his investment opportunity was just a scheme to recruit more people for future retreats. It's a classic pyramid scheme structure, just dressed up with new age terminology and feel-good buzzwords. He also has a string of unpaid judgments against him from former landlords, and his credit score would apparently make a bankruptcy lawyer weep with despair. This might get very interesting very soon, especially if Jessica is counting on Derek's supposed financial success to support her post-divorce lifestyle. Thanks for all the comments and ongoing support, by the way. It really helps to have objective outsiders confirm that I'm not crazy for feeling the way I do about this situation. Sometimes, especially during those quiet moments in the middle of the night, I find myself wondering if I'm overreacting to this whole mess or being too unforgiving. Then I remember the image of Jessica standing up at that restaurant table, taking Derek's hand like they'd rehearsed the moment, and introducing him as her new partner on what was supposed to be our anniversary celebration. And immediately, I find my resolve again. Some betrayals are simply too calculated and cruel to forgive, no matter how much history you share with someone. I'll update again when there's more significant news to share. The wheels of divorce proceedings grind slowly, but we have a mediation session scheduled for next week, according to Thompson. They warned me to prepare for fireworks, because Jessica's lawyer is apparently known for dramatic tactics and courtroom theatrics. This should be interesting. So after Jessica's ridiculous demands and her accusations of me being some kind of financial tyrant and controlling husband, Thompson scheduled the mediation session for yesterday. Let me paint you a picture of who was present for this theatrical performance. On one side of the table, we had Jessica, Derek. Yes, he actually came and looked like he owned the entire place, probably wearing those new $1,200 designer boots that he couldn't actually afford but somehow managed to lease. Nicole serving as Jessica's emotional support system and their lawyer. Derek had this smugness radiating from him like he was the star of his own reality show. On the other side, it was just me and Thompson, which honestly felt like bringing a scalpel to what was clearly going to be a knife fight. The mediator was a no-nonsense older woman named Dr. Martinez, who clearly had extensive experience dealing with exactly this type of entitled drama. She laid out the ground rules for the session in a calm, professional manner. Jessica immediately tried to interrupt with a sob story about how emotionally traumatized she was by my sudden abandonment of our marriage. But Dr. Martinez shut that down with a single raised hand and continued her introduction without missing a beat. I could tell right away that this wasn't going to go the way Jessica had planned in her head. Jessica started the session by reiterating all of her outrageous demands. The house, the spousal support, my grandfather's watch, the whole fantasy package. Her lawyer presented her case by painting Jessica as this wronged woman who had been emotionally devastated and left financially vulnerable by my cruel actions. According to this creative work of fiction, I had systematically isolated Jessica throughout our marriage, controlled all of our finances with an iron fist, actively discouraged her professional development at every turn, and then cruelly abandoned her the very moment she tried to express her authentic needs for personal growth and spiritual fulfillment. Nicole chimed in right on cue with teary-eyed endorsements of Jessica's supposed victimhood, occasionally shooting glares in my direction like I was some kind of monster who had deliberately destroyed an innocent woman's life. Her performance would have won an Oscar in the Best Supporting Drama Queen category, I have to give her that. Derek sat there throughout this entire presentation with that same infuriating smirk, occasionally patting Jessica's hand like he was comforting some delicate flower that had been crushed by the cruel world. The whole performance was absolutely nauseating to watch, like a badly written soap opera where everyone was overacting their parts. Jessica even had the audacity to accuse me of hiding assets, trying to build on her financially controlling husband narrative. She claimed that I had maintained a secret slush fund that I used for lavish personal expenses while she supposedly struggled to make ends meet. It was a bold-faced lie, crafted specifically to make me look bad and justify her outrageous financial demands. Then it was Thompson's turn to respond, and I have to say, it was absolutely beautiful to watch. Calmly and methodically, they began to dismantle Jessica's entire fantasy piece by piece, using nothing but documented facts and evidence. First, they addressed the emotional distress claim by presenting a sworn affidavit from our waiter at the anniversary restaurant. This affidavit corroborated my exact account of Jessica introducing Derek as her new partner in front of me and other diners. So much for her claims about my sudden abandonment and her supposed transparency. Then Thompson began to outline the timeline of Jessica's affair. And this is where things got really interesting. Marcus engaged a private investigator immediately following the anniversary dinner, Thompson explained. I have to admit, I didn't know about this part of their strategy. They hadn't told me they were having Jessica and Derek followed, but I maintained my poker face during the presentation. Thompson then presented the full private investigator's report, and the room went completely silent. The report showed Jessica and Derek meeting regularly and very intimately for at least 10 months prior to our anniversary dinner. There were date-stamped photographs, copies of hotel reservation details, restaurant receipts, a complete paper trail of their affair from various establishments around the city. So much for Jessica's story about transparency and my supposedly abrupt abandonment of our marriage. The anniversary dinner wasn't a moment of honesty. It was a calculated, cruel ambush that had been planned for months. Jessica's face went pale as the evidence was presented. Derek's smirk started to waver noticeably. Nicole looked like she was about to throw up right there at the conference table. Second, Thompson addressed Jessica's claims about financial control and her supposedly sacrificed career potential. They produced 4 years' worth of my bank statements, showing a consistent pattern of financial support for every single one of Jessica's entrepreneurial ventures, no matter how unrealistic or short-lived they turned out to be. $15,000 for her failed artisanal crystal jewelry business that never sold a single piece. $10,000 for her Pilates teacher certification program that she actually did complete. $18,000 for her abandoned wellness coaching startup that consisted of motivational Instagram posts. And my personal favorite, $25,000 for that healing retreat she insisted on hosting in Costa Rica, which attracted exactly 4 paying customers despite months of promotion and marketing. Thompson also presented email evidence where Jessica had explicitly stated multiple times that she preferred working part-time because it gave her more freedom for self-care and personal growth activities. Her spousal support claim evaporated before our eyes, as the documentation clearly showed that her limited work schedule was entirely her own choice, not some sacrifice she made for our marriage. Third, they addressed the issue of my grandfather's watch with swift efficiency. Thompson presented my grandfather's will, which clearly stipulated that the 1972 Omega Speedmaster was left specifically to me alone. They also had a heartfelt letter that my grandfather had written to me about the importance of passing this family heirloom down through the generations. End of discussion on that particular front. Fourth, regarding the house division, Thompson reiterated our original proposal, a standard buyout option or sale with 50-50 split of the equity. Before Jessica's lawyer could even begin to argue against this reasonable arrangement, Thompson smoothly transitioned to what they called the matter of Jessica's spending patterns. While Marcus maintained separate bank accounts for most of their marriage, Thompson stated in a calm, professional tone, Jessica was a supplementary card holder on one of his credit cards, with the explicit understanding that it was to be used only for agreed-upon household expenses or genuine emergencies. Thompson then produced itemized credit card statements for the entire past year, highlighting a clear and dramatic deviation in spending patterns starting approximately 10 months ago, coinciding perfectly with the timeline established by the private investigator's report regarding her affair with Derek. The charges amounted to just over $16,000 for high-end dinners at restaurants that I had never frequented with Jessica, boutique purchases for men's clothing items, and romantic weekend getaways. Every single charge aligned perfectly with the dates and locations established in the PI report concerning Derek's activities with my wife. The implication was crystal clear to everyone in that room. Marital funds, even though indirectly accessed via a credit card that I was ultimately responsible for paying, had been systematically used to finance Jessica's affair for nearly a year. Fifth, and this was where things got truly devastating, Thompson addressed the subject of Jessica's new partner, Derek. They presented public records showing that Derek had outstanding judgments totaling $92,000 against him from various former landlords and creditors. There was documented evidence of a history of failed businesses where investors had lost substantial amounts of money, and a pending civil lawsuit from a former girlfriend alleging that Derek had borrowed $52,000 for a can't-miss investment opportunity that had mysteriously disappeared without a trace. The records also showed tax liens from the IRS spanning 4 consecutive years, indicating a pattern of financial irresponsibility that went far beyond simple bad luck or economic circumstances. Thompson even had a written statement from one of Derek's former business partners detailing his established pattern of financial irresponsibility and manipulative behavior with vulnerable people who trusted him. There were also testimonials from 3 former participants in his abundance retreats who stated under oath that they had been promised unrealistic returns on investments that never materialized and that Derek's entire operation appeared to be designed to separate desperate people from their money. During this presentation, Derek turned a fascinating shade of purple that I didn't know human skin could achieve. Jessica looked like she had been physically slapped across the face. Nicole actually gasped audibly at these revelations, apparently having had no idea about the true nature of the man her sister had chosen to destroy her marriage for. The mediator looked from Jessica to her lawyer, and the air in the room became thick with the weight of years of shattered entitlement, finally colliding with documented reality. Jessica's lawyer, to his credit, looked like he wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole. He quickly asked for a recess so they could discuss their position privately, which was clearly lawyer speak for, "We need to figure out how to salvage this disaster." During the break, I witnessed something that was almost more satisfying than Thompson's methodical presentation of the facts. I could see Jessica and Derek in the hallway outside the mediation room, engaged in what could only be described as an intense, whispered argument. Derek was gesturing angrily while Jessica was crying. Not the manipulative tears she'd been deploying during the session, but genuine tears of someone whose entire world was crumbling around them. Nicole just stood there looking completely shell-shocked, like she was finally beginning to understand that everything she thought she knew about this situation had been completely wrong. At one point, I distinctly heard Derek say, "You told me he'd cave," before he stormed off toward the restroom looking absolutely furious. The mask was finally slipping, and the real Derek was emerging from behind his carefully constructed spiritual guru persona. When they returned to the mediation room, their entire attitude had changed dramatically. Gone was the entitled arrogance and the victim complex. Suddenly, they were very agreeable to selling the house and splitting the equity 50-50 exactly as I had originally proposed. The demand for spousal support mysteriously disappeared from the conversation entirely. My grandfather's watch was acknowledged as mine without any further questions or challenges. Most importantly, the $16,000 that Jessica had effectively stolen via the credit card to fund her affair would be properly documented as marital debt that she was personally responsible for repaying. This amount would be deducted from her share of the house equity, which seemed more than fair given the circumstances. Throughout this complete reversal of their position, Jessica remained silent, just staring at Derek with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. It was like she was finally seeing him clearly for the first time, without the romantic haze that had been clouding her judgment for months. Derek, meanwhile, was avoiding her gaze entirely and looking utterly deflated, like a balloon that had suddenly lost all its air. Nicole was white-faced and unusually quiet for once in her life. The woman who had spent weeks lecturing me about my supposed failures as a husband couldn't seem to find any words to defend her sister's position anymore. The most satisfying part of this entire experience wasn't about revenge, if you can even call it that. It was simply about the truth finally coming out in its full, unvarnished form. It was about Jessica being forced to face the direct consequences of her actions and her greed without being able to hide behind victim narratives or manipulative sob stories. She had tried to play dirty, to lie and manipulate her way to a better settlement than she deserved, and it had blown up in her face spectacularly. The mediator made sure to note Jessica's attempts to mislead the mediation process in her official report. While this didn't constitute perjury in a legal sense, it would definitely be on the record if Jessica tried any similar tactics moving forward. As we were leaving the building, I couldn't help but overhear Derek telling Jessica that he needed to go clear his head for a while. Having witnessed his performance during the session, I interpreted this as Derek speak for, "The gravy train has completely derailed, and I need to find the nearest exit before this gets any worse for me." I walked out of that mediation session feeling lighter than I had felt in months. True justice isn't always loud and dramatic like you see in movies. Sometimes it's just the quiet, satisfying click of facts slotting perfectly into place, revealing the truth that was always there beneath the surface. I'll update again if anything significant happens, but at this point, it seems like we're finally on track for a straightforward divorce without any more unnecessary drama or legal theatrics. The house is going on the market next week, and my lawyer thinks we can finalize everything within 30 to 45 days if all goes smoothly from here. Thanks again for all the support and advice throughout this ordeal. It's been absolutely invaluable during what has certainly been one of the most challenging periods of my life. P.S. To the person who asked if Thompson is single, yes, they are, but they're also my lawyer, and pursuing anything romantic would be inappropriate on multiple levels. Plus, I'm nowhere near ready to date anyone seriously at this point. Maybe in a year or so when all the dust has completely settled and I've had time to process everything that's happened. It's been about a month since the mediation session, and I figured you all deserved a proper update since you've been so incredibly supportive throughout this whole ordeal. The response to my previous posts has been overwhelming, and your encouragement has meant more to me than I can adequately express. First, let me cover the practical aspects that have been moving forward. The house went on the market 3 weeks ago and sold in just 5 days, which was absolutely amazing in this current market. We actually got $35,000 over the asking price, which was a very pleasant surprise that neither of us had been expecting. The closing is scheduled for next month, assuming everything continues to go smoothly with the paperwork and inspections. The divorce itself is proceeding without any additional drama. Now that Jessica's fantasies of taking me to the cleaners have been completely shattered by the harsh realities that were presented during the mediation session, my lawyer expects everything to be completely finalized within the next 30 days, which will finally close this chapter of my life permanently. Now for the much more interesting part of this update, what's actually happened with Jessica, Derek, and the whole circus of people surrounding them since the mediation session exposed the truth about their relationship and Derek's character. Remember how Derek was suddenly in such a big hurry to clear his head after the mediation session when all of his financial problems and scamming history were laid bare for everyone to see? Well, according to mutual friends who are still in contact with Jessica, I'm maintaining absolutely no direct communication with her, Derek didn't come back to their shared apartment that night. Or the next night, for that matter. In fact, Derek cleared out most of his belongings from their apartment while Jessica was at work the day after the mediation happened. Apparently, once he realized that there wasn't going to be any substantial payday from our divorce settlement, that Jessica wouldn't be getting the house outright or receiving substantial monthly alimony payments, he decided that his authentic spiritual journey needed to take a completely different path. Specifically, a path that led directly away from Jessica and her now significantly limited financial resources. Jessica tried calling and texting Derek for days, straight after he disappeared. He finally responded with a single text message that a mutual friend showed me, because Jessica had apparently been showing it to everyone she knew while looking for sympathy and support. The text said, and I'm quoting this word for word, "I need to realign my energies with more abundant frequencies right now. Your negative attitude toward wealth manifestation is holding back my full potential for growth. I cherish our soul connection but must prioritize my spiritual growth path." Translation: You're broke now and can't fund my lifestyle anymore, so I'm out of here. It was cold, certainly. But considering that this is the exact same man that Jessica chose to blow up our 17-year marriage for, I find it very difficult to summon much sympathy for her current situation. As they say, if you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. Or in this particular case, if you hitch your wagon to a con artist, you're eventually going to get conned. It's absolutely inevitable. The irony of the entire situation is almost poetic when you really think about it. Jessica destroyed her marriage for a man who abandoned her the moment she couldn't financially support his fraudulent lifestyle anymore. Nicole has gone completely radio silent on social media since the mediation session. There are no more posts about narcissistic ex-husbands or supporting her sister through supposed trauma and abuse. I heard through mutual friends that her husband finally put his foot down and told her to stop getting involved in drama that wasn't hers to manage. Apparently, he was getting tired of his wife spending hours every single day on the phone with Jessica, coaching her on various strategies to extract maximum money from me during the divorce proceedings. As for Jessica herself, she's been on what can only be described as a steep downward spiral since Derek's dramatic exit from her life. She lost her part-time Pilates instructor position when she showed up to work visibly upset and spent an entire inner peace session complaining to her students about toxic ex-husbands and how men simply can't be trusted in relationships. The studio owner apparently told her to take some time off to find her center, which is yoga speak for, "You're fired, please don't come back." Jessica has also been systematically bad-mouthing me to anyone who will listen, telling increasingly elaborate and dramatic stories about how I supposedly emotionally abandoned her years ago, forcing her to seek genuine connection and understanding elsewhere with Derek. Several mutual friends have reached out to me, concerned about her apparent mental state and asking for my side of the story. I've kept my response simple and straightforward with everyone who asks. Jessica brought her boyfriend to our anniversary dinner and introduced him as her new partner. I filed for divorce the next day. Everything else is just noise, drama, and revisionist history. Most reasonable people understand the situation immediately when I explain it that simply. The ones who don't probably weren't really genuine friends to begin with. The most bizarre development happened last week, though. And it really drove home just how far Jessica has fallen since her grand plan to upgrade her life completely backfired on her. Jessica showed up at my workshop completely unannounced while I was in the middle of an important client consultation. I heard raised voices coming from the front office area, so I excused myself from my meeting to see what was happening. My assistant, Jenny, was trying to politely but firmly tell Jessica that I wasn't available for visitors, while Jessica was insisting that she had every right to see me whenever she wanted, apparently still operating under some delusion that we had that kind of relationship. I asked Jenny to take my client, Mr. Patterson, back to the design room to show him the cherrywood samples we had been discussing, and told him I would be there shortly to continue our consultation. Once they were out of earshot, I turned to Jessica and said simply, 5 minutes. Jessica looked absolutely rough. And I mean really rough. The designer Pilates clothes that had been her uniform for years were completely gone, replaced with wrinkled sweatpants and an oversized hoodie that looked like she'd been sleeping in it. Her normally perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping or eating properly for weeks. When she saw me, she immediately burst into tears and launched into a rambling, desperate speech about how she had made a terrible mistake with Derek. She went on about how Derek had manipulated and controlled her throughout their entire relationship, convincing her that I was somehow holding her back from her full potential, and that she deserved more freedom and spiritual growth than our marriage could provide. According to Jessica's new version of events, Derek had abandoned her the moment he realized there wasn't going to be a substantial divorce settlement for them to live off together. She claimed that she had been blind to his true nature, but could now see clearly that what we had built together over 17 years was real and precious and worth fighting to preserve. Then came the part I had been expecting from the moment she walked into my workshop. I think we should try again, Marcus. We had 17 years together. That has to mean something important and significant. We could go to counseling, work through this whole mess together. I know you still love me deep down, even after everything that's happened. You know we belong together. We always have. I just stared at her for a long moment, genuinely amazed by the sheer audacity of what she was suggesting. After everything that had happened, the months-long affair, the calculated ambush at our anniversary dinner, her attempts to financially destroy me in the divorce proceedings, all the lies she had told about me being controlling and financially abusive, she genuinely thought there was a possibility that I might take her back. Jessica, I said quietly, do you remember what you said to me when you introduced Derek at our anniversary dinner? You called him your new partner, not your friend, not someone you were interested in getting to know better, but your partner, like we were business associates instead of a married couple celebrating 17 years together. But I was confused, she interrupted desperately. Derek manipulated me into thinking things that weren't true. This isn't really about Derek anyway. You're absolutely right, I said firmly. This isn't about Derek at all. This is about you. You showed me exactly who you really are. Someone who could lie to my face for 10 months straight. Someone who could use my credit card to fund romantic dates with another man. Someone who could try to steal my grandfather's watch by claiming it was somehow a gift to our marriage. Those weren't Derek's choices, Jessica. Those were your choices. Her face completely crumpled at this response. So you're just going to throw away 17 years just like that? Like it meant nothing to you? No, Jessica, I replied calmly. You threw away 17 years. I'm just accepting that reality and moving forward with my life. There's a significant difference between the two. But where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? She wailed. Derek left me with almost nothing. I'm behind on my rent. I lost my job. I don't have anywhere to turn. And there it was. The real reason for her sudden desire to reconcile and work things out. It wasn't love. It wasn't genuine remorse for what she had done, and it certainly wasn't some newfound appreciation for our relationship. It was just the cold, harsh reality that her carefully planned upgrade had backfired spectacularly, and now she desperately needed a safety net to catch her fall. You'll get your share from the house sale, I told her. It's a substantial amount, more than enough to start over fresh somewhere else. What you choose to do with that money and that opportunity is entirely up to you. But I don't want to start over, she said, her voice rising to almost a wail. I want my old life back. I want things to go back to exactly how they were before. I checked my watch deliberately. Your 5 minutes are up, Jessica. I have a client waiting for me who's paying for my time and expertise. Please don't come to my workplace again. Any further communication needs to go through our respective lawyers. As I turned to leave and return to my client, Jessica grabbed my arm desperately. Marcus, please. I've got nowhere else to go. Nicole's husband won't let me stay with them anymore because of all the drama. I'm behind on my rent and might get evicted. Could I maybe move back into the house temporarily, just until it sells? Please?" I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. "No, Jessica. That's absolutely not going to happen. Your choices have consequences, and I'm not responsible for managing those consequences anymore. That's not my job." She stared at me for a moment, and I could see her expression morphing from desperate pleading to genuine anger. "You'll regret this decision," she said with sudden venom. "You're being cruel and heartless, and you'll regret treating me this way." "No," I said calmly as I walked her toward the door. "I'm being fair and reasonable. There's a significant difference between the two, even if you can't see it right now." As I opened the door for her to leave, Jessica had one final parting shot. "You know you'll never find anyone who loves you the way I did." I couldn't help but smile slightly at that particular comment. "That's exactly the point, Jessica," I replied. "I sincerely hope I never do find someone who loves me the way you did." I watched her drive away in her beat-up Honda, and the strangest feeling washed over me. It wasn't satisfaction or vindication or even residual anger. It was just peace. Like the final page of a very long, complicated chapter was finally being turned, and I could start writing something completely new. The divorce will be finalized soon, which will officially close this chapter of my life. The house is sold and set to close next month, so that major piece of our shared assets will be properly divided according to the mediation agreement. My business is actually doing better than it ever has. Word of mouth about quality craftsmanship travels fast in this industry, and I've been getting more high-end commissions than I can handle. I'm sleeping better than I have in years, which I think says everything about the state of my marriage that I didn't want to acknowledge at the time. I've even started rock climbing again, something that Jessica always complained was too dangerous and took too much time away from her and our relationship. It's amazing how much of myself I had gradually given up over the years without really realizing it was happening. Life has a way of moving forward, and sometimes it even gets significantly better when you remove the sources of constant stress and drama. I'm rediscovering parts of myself that I had forgotten existed during those 17 years of trying to keep Jessica happy and satisfied. Thanks again for all the support throughout this entire ordeal. It's meant more than you know to have objective strangers validate that I wasn't losing my mind or overreacting to what happened. Sometimes you need that outside perspective to confirm that your reality is actually reality. Hey everyone, it's been 6 months since my last update and almost 8 months since that fateful anniversary dinner that changed everything. I wasn't initially planning on posting again about this whole situation, but enough significant things have happened that I thought you all deserved a final update, especially since so many of you have sent supportive messages asking how everything turned out in the end. The divorce was officially finalized 5 months ago. The terms that we agreed upon during the mediation session held firm throughout the entire legal process. The house sold for that excellent price I mentioned. Still can't believe we managed to get $35,000 over asking in this market. And the equity was split exactly as agreed, after deducting Jessica's affair-funded expenses from her share as we had negotiated. I got my grandfather's 1972 Omega Speedmaster back without any further legal challenges, and it now sits safely in a secure deposit box. I'll probably pass it down to my nephew someday, continuing the family tradition my grandfather had intended when he left it specifically to me. So what happened to Jessica, Derek, and Nicole after the dust settled? Let me give you the full story, because it's quite a tale of consequences catching up with poor decisions. Jessica, from what I hear through the grapevine, because I maintain absolutely zero direct contact with her, is not having a good time at all. The money from the house sale wasn't the substantial windfall that she and Derek had apparently been expecting, especially after her lawyer fees and the deduction for her affair-funded expenses that came out of her share. Still, it was a substantial amount, around $190,000, which should have been more than enough to start over completely if it had been managed wisely and responsibly. It was not managed wisely at all. After Derek abandoned her, Jessica apparently fell into a deep depression. According to mutual friends who still keep in touch with her, she started spending money like it was water, apparently trying to fill the emotional void, or maybe convince herself and others that she was still living her best spiritual growth life. Designer clothes, expensive spa weekends, and a 3-week healing retreat in Sedona that cost $18,000. Money that could have secured her housing and basic needs for months. Then came Jessica's biggest mistake yet. Derek reappeared in her life about 4 months after he had vanished following the mediation session. He suddenly started texting Jessica again, apparently feeding her some elaborate story about having experienced a profound spiritual awakening during his absence. According to what I've heard, He told her that he had realized their soul connection was authentic and necessary for his personal growth, and he apologized for temporarily misaligning with her energy. He suggested they reconnect on a much deeper level than before, and Jessica, apparently desperate, lonely, and still vulnerable to his manipulation, welcomed him back with open arms and, more importantly, an open wallet. Derek convinced Jessica to invest in his newest venture, a revolutionary digital wellness platform that would supposedly democratize spiritual enlightenment through blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. I'm not making this up. He literally combined cryptocurrency, wellness coaching, and multi-level marketing into one giant, elaborate scam designed specifically to prey on people like Jessica. Jessica put $135,000, the vast majority of her remaining divorce settlement, into this venture. Derek had her sign documents making him the majority shareholder and sole decision-maker of the company for efficiency purposes. 4 weeks later, Derek cleaned out the entire business account and disappeared again, this time permanently. From what our mutual friends tell me, the business was nothing but an empty shell company. There was no actual product, no real technology, no legitimate business plan, just some flashy mock-ups and buzzword-filled presentations that impressed Jessica but would have sent any legitimate investor running for the hills immediately. Jessica is now living in a tiny studio apartment, working 3 different jobs just to make ends meet. Morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening shifts as a receptionist at a budget gym, and weekend shifts at a big box retail store. She's apparently $35,000 in credit card debt, on top of losing her entire divorce settlement to Derek's scam. According to people who've seen her recently, she's been telling everyone that she's building her brand and will soon launch a comeback with a podcast about surviving narcissistic abuse and financial manipulation. The irony is absolutely staggering, considering that she's the one who had the affair and tried to manipulate our divorce settlement to her advantage. Derek, predictably, is nowhere to be found. Word through the grapevine is that he's already moved on to target a recently divorced real estate agent in another state entirely. It's the same exact scam with a different victim, rinse and repeat. This appears to be his established pattern of operation, moving from one vulnerable woman to the next, always staying one step ahead of the consequences of his previous cons. Nicole has been remarkably quiet ever since her husband put his foot down about her involvement in Jessica's drama. From what I hear through mutual acquaintances, their marriage has been significantly strained by Nicole's obsessive involvement in Jessica's situation. She still provides emotional support to Jessica when asked, but she's completely stopped the public social media campaign against me that had been going on for months. I think seeing the real Derek exposed during that mediation session was a genuine wake-up call for Nicole. She finally realized that her sister wasn't the innocent victim she had been portraying her as, and that maybe, just maybe, there was more to the story than Jessica had been telling her. As for me, I'm doing significantly better than just okay. I've expanded my furniture business considerably, hiring 2 additional skilled craftsmen and taking on much higher-end commissions than I was handling before. I'm now making custom pieces for a boutique hotel chain, which has been both financially lucrative and creatively satisfying in ways that my previous work wasn't. I bought a smaller house much closer to my workshop. Nothing fancy or pretentious, but it has a fantastic space for a home woodworking studio and a deck that overlooks a small creek. It feels much more authentically like me than our old house ever did, which I now realize was decorated entirely according to Jessica's aesthetic vision that always seemed to prioritize appearance over actual comfort and functionality. I've reconnected with several old friends, many of whom have admitted that they found Jessica controlling and emotionally exhausting to be around, but didn't want to say anything while we were married out of respect for our relationship. It's been eye-opening to hear their honest perspectives about what our marriage looked like from the outside. I've started rock climbing again 3 times a week, which has been incredible for both my physical and mental health. I also joined a local woodworkers guild, where I've made several new friends who share my genuine passion for craftsmanship and creating beautiful, functional things with their hands. The biggest and most unexpected development came about 3 months ago. Remember when Jessica showed up at my workshop begging for help and reconciliation? My assistant Jenny handled that entire awkward situation perfectly. She remained calm and professional throughout the whole ordeal, protecting both my time and my emotional well-being. Afterward, Jenny asked if I was okay and offered to grab lunch if I needed to talk through what had just happened. That simple lunch invitation turned into dinner, which gradually evolved into movie nights and weekend hiking trips. We're taking everything very slowly and deliberately, since both of us have had our fair share of relationship disasters and trust issues that we're working through. But there's something genuinely good and healthy developing between Jenny and me. She's the complete opposite of Jessica in every way that actually matters. She's honest and direct without being cruel, kind and supportive without being a pushover, ambitious about her own goals without being materialistic or demanding about lifestyle upgrades. Most importantly, Jenny actually cares about my work and asks thoughtful, intelligent questions about the projects I'm working on. She sees my craftsmanship as something valuable and meaningful, rather than just viewing it as a source of income to fund her desired lifestyle like Jessica always did. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I feel like I'm with someone who genuinely sees the real me and likes what she sees. There's no manipulation, no hidden agendas, no constant drama or emotional crises that need to be managed. It's refreshing in a way that I had almost forgotten was possible in a relationship. But honestly, the real victory here isn't finding someone new to share my life with. The real victory is rediscovering myself after all these years of compromising who I was to accommodate Jessica's needs and demands. I didn't fully realize how much I had dimmed my own light during my marriage to Jessica, or how many of my personal interests and friendships I had gradually set aside to make room for her constant need for attention and validation. The week after our divorce was finalized, I drove up to a mountain cabin alone for 4 days. It was just me, some books I'd been wanting to read, my thoughts, and an incredible view of the mountains. As I sat there in the peaceful quiet, I realized that I couldn't remember the last time I had done something like that. Something purely for my own enjoyment and renewal, without having to consider Jessica's needs or preferences. Jessica had always made me feel guilty about taking any time for myself, as if my desire for solitude or personal interests was somehow a personal rejection of her and our relationship. That weekend in the mountains gave me a clarity about my life that I hadn't experienced in years. I saw clearly how much of myself I had systematically compromised over the years, and how many obvious red flags I had ignored because I was so committed to making our marriage work no matter what the personal cost. It wasn't just Jessica's affair that ended our relationship. It was 17 years of small, gradual compromises that slowly eroded who I really was as an individual person. There was one final encounter with Jessica that's worth mentioning, because it really crystallized everything I had learned about boundaries and self-respect throughout this entire ordeal. About 6 weeks ago, I received a call from a phone number I didn't recognize. I normally don't answer calls from unknown numbers, but I was expecting a call from a potential client about a major commission, so I picked up. It was Jessica, and she sounded completely different from the woman I had known for 17 years. Her voice was subdued, almost meek, and utterly broken in a way that was genuinely difficult to listen to. "Marcus, please don't hang up," she said immediately. I need to talk to you about something really important." I almost ended the call right there, but something in her tone made me pause. "What do you want, Jessica?" "I'm in serious trouble," she said, and I could hear her voice cracking with emotion. "I made a terrible mistake with Derek. He took everything. Marcus, everything I had left from the house sale. I'm about to be evicted from my apartment. My car was repossessed yesterday. I have nowhere to go and absolutely no one left to turn to." I said nothing, just waited for her to continue with whatever request was coming. "I know I have absolutely no right to ask this," she continued, "but I was wondering if you might consider loaning me enough money to get back on my feet. Just as a loan, I swear I'll pay you back every single penny. I could even sign something legal to guarantee the repayment." "Jessica," I said quietly, "why would I do that?" Because despite everything that happened between us, we were together for 17 years. That has to count for something, right? I know I made terrible mistakes, but— "Mistakes?" I interrupted her. "You had a 10-month affair. You brought your boyfriend to our anniversary dinner. You tried to take me for everything in the divorce proceedings, and then you let that same man scam you out of your entire settlement. Those aren't mistakes, Jessica. Those are choices. Deliberate, calculated choices that you made." "I know, but—" she started, and now she was crying. Not the manipulative tears I had seen so many times during our marriage, but genuine broken sobs of complete desperation. "And now you're asking me to bail you out of the consequences of those choices," I continued. "I have nowhere else to turn," she whispered through her tears. "Nicole's husband won't let me stay with them anymore. My parents are in Florida and they're barely talking to me after everything that happened. I'm working 3 jobs and can barely afford food after paying my credit card minimums. I might have to declare bankruptcy, Marcus. I might end up homeless." For just a brief moment, I felt a genuine pang of sympathy for her situation. 17 years is an incredibly long time to share your life with someone, and it's difficult to completely turn off all feelings of concern for their well-being. But then I remembered all the lies, all the manipulation, all the attempts to destroy me financially during the divorce, and I knew exactly what I had to do. Jessica, I'm genuinely sorry that you're in this situation, I said calmly. But I'm not responsible for solving your problems anymore. We're divorced. Your financial difficulties aren't mine to manage. So you're just going to let me end up on the street? She asked, and I could hear her voice hardening slightly. There was the entitled Jessica I remembered, the one who believed she was owed rescue from the consequences of her own actions. You're not going to end up on the street, I replied firmly. There are resources available, social services, bankruptcy protection if it comes to that, financial counseling programs. Use them. Figure it out. That's what responsible adults do when they make bad decisions. They deal with the fallout themselves. I can't believe you're being so cold and heartless, she said, after everything we shared together over 17 years. This isn't cold, Jessica. This is called having boundaries, something our relationship always completely lacked. I genuinely wish you well, I really do. But I can't be your safety net anymore. You made your choices and now you need to live with the consequences. You'll regret this, she said, but the threat sounded hollow and desperate rather than menacing. Someday you'll regret not helping me when you had the chance to do the right thing. No, I replied with complete certainty, I won't regret this. Because I learned something incredibly important from our divorce, Jessica. I learned that other people's poor choices aren't my responsibility to fix. I spent 17 years trying to make you happy, trying to solve your problems, trying to be everything you needed me to be. And it was never enough. Nothing I did was ever sufficient. I'm done trying to fix your problems. I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. I felt a momentary twinge of guilt, but it passed very quickly. For the first time in our entire relationship, including our marriage, I had put my own well-being and emotional health first. And it felt incredibly liberating in a way that I struggle to adequately describe. That phone call represented the final closing of a chapter that had already been over for months. Jessica had made her bed through a series of deliberate, selfish choices, and now she had to lie in it. I wasn't going to rescue her from the consequences of destroying our marriage and squandering her second chance with Derek's scam. I've learned that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for someone is to let them experience the full weight of their decisions without rushing in to cushion the impact. Real growth and change only happen when people are forced to confront the reality of their choices without someone else stepping in to make everything okay. Life has a way of moving forward, and sometimes it even gets significantly better when you remove the sources of constant stress and negativity from your world. I'm living proof of that principle. Thanks again for all the support throughout this entire ordeal. Your encouragement and validation have meant more than you could possibly know during what was certainly one of the most challenging and transformative periods of my life. The support from this community has been absolutely invaluable, and I'm grateful to everyone who took the time to read my story, offer advice, and remind me that I wasn't losing my mind or overreacting to an incredibly difficult situation. To anyone who might be going through something similar, trust your instincts, maintain your boundaries, and remember that you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from people who consistently show you through their actions that they don't respect you or value what you bring to their lives. My story had what I consider to be a happy ending, not because Jessica suffered consequences for her choices, though that did provide a certain sense of justice, but because I rediscovered who I was as an individual person outside of that relationship. I found my way back to myself, and that's something that no one can ever take away from me again. Life goes on, and sometimes it gets remarkably better than you ever imagined it could be.